him to care, while hiding a brutal, calculated darkness underneath. By day, he's a forensic expert. By night, he hunts and kills other murderers. Not out of justice, but because he needs to. This isn't redemption, it's addiction. But Dexter didn't just wake up this way. He was engineered. By trauma, by secrecy, by the people who thought they were saving him. This is part 1, the psychological creation of Dexter Morgan, and the descent that followed.
You don't think there are monsters in this world? You don't believe people are evil? I'll show you evil.
My dad gave me a code. I only kill the ones who deserve it.
I gotta watch that. I gotta watch that. I gotta watch the prequel. I gotta watch that.
You deserve it. I should have fucking killed you when I had the chance.
Is this the monster that you keep telling me about?
Trust me, when you meet the monster, you'll know.
Get the cash. You know I'm good for it, huh?
We've got an itch the money can't scratch.
When we study serial offenders from a clinical perspective, we often begin at their earliest environment, not just as a backdrop, but as a blueprint. For Dexter Morgan, born Dexter Moser in 1971, the earliest phase of life is not just a period of neglect or dysfunction, it's a complete collapse of safe developmental conditions. And that collapse becomes the foundation of his fractured identity. Before the trauma, there were moments of warmth. Dexter's mother, Laura Moser, despite her drug use and dangerous lifestyle, displayed visible affection for both Dexter and his older brother Brian. They played games, shared laughs, and established a bond that, at least briefly, followed what attachment theory would call a secure base model. Brian's protective behavior and Dexter's spirited playfulness reflect a typical early sibling dynamic. The young Dexter even relied on Brian as a comforter, a secondary attachment figure. From a developmental standpoint, these interactions suggest that Dexter's emotional architecture wasn't innately broken, it was interrupted. The first few years of life showed the potential for stable attachment until everything fell apart. October 2nd, 1973, when Dexter was just under 3 years old, he and Brian were trapped inside a shipping container and forced to witness the brutal execution of their mother, a dismemberment via chainsaw, conducted by cartel enforcers in front of them. This is not trauma in the loose, casual sense. This is complex developmental trauma, or CPTSD, in its purest clinical form. It occurs when a child is exposed to repeated, prolonged or invasive traumatic events within a caregiving system, and when the trauma involves a caregiver or occurs in the context of complete helplessness. The damage to identity formation is profound. Key symptoms observed in adult survivors of such events include...
Yeah, this nigga, hey, this is a definition of a YouTuber, bro. Telling you that research is important. The editing is so good. The way that he's able to break down what's going on, you're crazy, is just great. Good.
Persistent emotional numbing, dissociation, memory fragmentation, inability to regulate affect, distorted self-perception, and lack of trust in others.
And they got most of them.
We observe all of these in later life, but it begins here, in that shipping container. 2 boys soaked in blood, abandoned in silence for 2 days. One remembers everything, the other suppresses it so deeply that he can't recall it for decades. This dissociation is not a psychological weakness, it's a survival mechanism. The mind, unable to process the horror, shuts itself off from emotional input, and when the rescue finally comes, it doesn't offer healing, it offers another layer of distortion.
Oh, my audio is working. It is, okay, thank God. Oh, I'm mad.
When Harry Morgan takes both boys and tries to raise them, he makes a harsh judgment. Keep Dexter, get rid of Brian. He claims that Brian's trauma is too much to handle, but let's be clear, this was a subjective judgment, driven by fear, not diagnostic insight.
It must be in the prequel. Some of these clips, I remember that in regular Dexter.
Brian's rejection is pivotal. It serves as the one remaining attachment Dexter had left. His brother, his protector, gone. And in that moment, Harry doesn't just adopt a child, he creates a psychological experiment. He takes a boy broken by trauma and attempts to mold him into something manageable, something useful, something that won't destroy the world, but might destroy him. Brian is institutionalized, Dexter is domesticated. Both outcomes are equally unnatural. Soon after his adoption, signs of Dexter's disconnection begin to surface. He shows no emotional response to joy or social engagement. During family outings, he fails to smile, not out of defiance, but because the behavior feels alien to him. When asked to smile for the family, he complies, but only when told it will make his mother happy. the behavior is learned, not felt. This is a textbook case of emotional detachment with adaptive social mimicry. He doesn't feel what others feel, but he learns to simulate it based on outcomes. It's not empathy, it's imitation. Then comes a darker sign, the grave of the neighbor's dog.
That dog was a noisy little creep, Dad. He was barking all night and Mom couldn't sleep and she was very, very sick, and that lousy dog was yapping at every leaf that blew down the sidewalk.
There are a lot of bones in there, Dexter. They're not just buddies.
Harry finds a burial site filled not just with one pet, but multiple bones. Dexter killed Buddy the dog, not out of malice, but because it was noisy. That's how Dexter frames the event, cause and effect. No guilt, just problem solving. When asked if he ever wanted to kill something bigger, like a person, Dexter says yes, not because of rage, just because. This lack of effect, this emotionally neutral admission of homicidal fantasy, is not standard conduct disorder behavior. It's more insidious. It suggests early affective flattening paired with instrumental thinking. Violence not as an emotional release, but as a form of internal regulation. Killing calms the noise. Harry, alarmed by these signs, decides to train Dexter to blend in. What follows is a deeply flawed form of behavioral conditioning. Dexter learns that emotions are less important than the appearance of emotion. He's told to smile even when he doesn't feel like it. He's told to fit in at school, even if it means bullying another child. But when he gets caught for that, he's corrected again, told not to be a bully, but not to be a hero either, just to conform. This results in a fragmented moral compass. Dexter's internal logic becomes binary. Some behaviors get me scolded, some get me praised. None of this connects to how I actually feel. This is what psychologists refer to as authority-dependent moral development, where right and wrong are determined solely by external feedback. In Dexter's case, Harry becomes the moral authority, not because Dexter trusts his ethics, but because Harry controls his consequences. Importantly, in Dexter's childhood, there are no signs of impulsivity.
Yeah, that is true, because the way that he relies on Harry, not rely on him, but especially during like Dexter, he sees Harry on the side, telling him what to do, telling him what not to do. And when he doesn't listen to him, Harry immediately says, see, this is how we listen to Dexter, this is how we don't do what we're supposed to do, Dexter. So what he's saying makes sense.
Tantrums or emotional volatility. Dexter isn't chaotic, he's measured, rational and withdrawn. This is not conduct disorder in the classic sense. It's something more unique, a psyche shaped not by defiance, but by adaptation to terror. Adolescence is when identity solidifies. For most people, it's a period of exploration and integration, a search for coherence between internal feelings and external behaviors. For Dexter, it becomes the opposite, a time of repression.
I watched the prequel, yeah.
From a psychological standpoint, Dexter enters adolescence already emotionally blunted due to the unresolved trauma and attachment disruption. His emotional regulation is externalized. He doesn't feel guilt, sadness, or joy in conventional ways. Instead, he experiences urges which he can't fully explain, and which cause anxiety when left unchecked. Harry sees this and responds not with therapy, but with tactical training. He teaches Dexter how to stalk, how to lie, how to fake smiles, how to kill, surgically, efficiently, and quietly. This is not an effort to heal the boy's pain, it's an effort to control his impulses, to domesticate him, to make him socially viable. In clinical terms, Harry replaces traditional parent-child attachment with instrumental conditioning, rewarding Dexter for mimicry, not authenticity. The damage here is subtle but immense. Dexter doesn't learn who he is. He learns who he's supposed to pretend to be.
You can do something to channel it. Use it for good.
How can it ever be good?
Son, there are people out there who do really bad things. Terrible people. And the police can't catch them all. Do you understand what I'm saying?
You're saying they deserve it.
That's right. But of course you have to learn how to spot them.
Psychologically, the code of Harry is not a moral framework. It's a set of contingency rules designed to enforce behavioral compliance. It tells Dexter what to do, but not why. There is no empathic reasoning in the code, no introspection, no development of conscience. The message is simple. You have urges, you can't stop them, so follow this checklist and don't get caught. From a developmental lens, this leads to morality by proxy. Right and wrong are determined not by internal values, but by the rules set out by an external figure. In this case, Harry.
And you could tell, because definitely later on in the show, where people try to be like, why do you keep on following this code? Especially Miguel. Season 3 Miguel was trying that code so badly. And Dexter's like, no, I'm going to follow it and I'm going to do what I'm going to do based on what it does. So yeah, that's true. He followed that code to the T. He wasn't going to change nothing. And when he changed it, he was upset about it.
Explains a key trait of Dexter's adult psychology. He doesn't feel remorse for killing. He feels anxiety about breaking the code. Because for Dexter, morality was never emotional. It was behavioral, a checklist, a protocol. This is consistent with authority-dependent moral development, often found in individuals raised in conditional affection with punitive discipline. They don't learn to evaluate ethics internally. They learn to follow rules in exchange for approval. Harry's love, even as Dexter enters adolescence, is still performance-based. If Dexter follows the code, he's praised. If he deviates, he's corrected. The relationship is functional, not emotional. As Dexter moves through high school, he shows minimal interest in romantic relationships, telling Harry he prefers to be alone. This is a common feature of individuals with avoidant attachment styles and deep emotional dissociation. Desire is confusing, intimacy is overwhelming, and vulnerability feels dangerous.
So, are you gonna go to the spring formal?
Why would I want to do that?
I wanted you to ask her to the dance, Dexter.
Yeah, well, I don't really care about girls. I just like being alone.
Most normal people don't. And it's important that you seem normal.
Even though I'm not.
That nigga said, I'm not interested in girls. That nigga should kill her.
Because
Harry's response is clinical. Take a girl to the school dance. Fit in, look normal. Again, the message is not discover who you are, it's disguise who you are. This reinforcement of inauthenticity, of perpetual roleplay, is what leads to compartmentalization. Dexter becomes split between the internal self, the urges, the detachment, the confusion, and the external self, the smiles, the dates, the social camouflage. This is also when we see the early emergence of narcissistic defenses. Not vanity, but the constructing of a false self to gain acceptance. Dexter learns to read people's expectations and meet them, even if it means suppressing his own emotional reality. During early adulthood, when Harry is ill and eventually hospitalized, he grants Dexter permission to act on his urges. Nurse Mary, suspected of euthanizing patients via morphine overdoses, becomes Dexter's first human victim. This is a pivotal moment, not just because of the act, but because of how it's executed. The act of killing is messy, but something clicks. It calms him, grounds him. In a world where emotions are distant and identity is fragmented, this moment brings focus. From that point on, ritual becomes regulation. Dexter develops a strict pre-kill protocol. Research the target, confirm guilt, create a kill room that's sterile, controlled, and symbolic. Take a blood slide as a trophy, verbally confront the victim, execute them with precision, dismember and dispose of the remains. Clinically, this is not simply a sequence of behavior, it's a compulsive stabilization process. A form of obsessive-compulsive structure designed to control anxiety and reassert power. The ritual is less about the death itself and more about the sense of order it brings. It becomes his death.
He's right. Everything he's saying, he's right. Especially during the show, when one of those things gets disrupted, he just keeps on thinking about it. It keeps on trying to figure out what happened and what he did wrong. He's right.
Albeit one rooted in violence. The blood slide trophies Dexter collects are not souvenirs of victory. They're tokens of control, physical confirmations of his actions, and anchors for memory. In clinical terms, they function as externalized memory objects, necessary for individuals who struggle with internal emotional processing. The slide box allows Dexter to reflect, remember, and reassert his dominance over the chaos of his own mind. Each slide is a suppressed emotion in physical form, a moment of gratification sealed in plastic. This is also where we see the emergence of addictive behavior patterns. The ritual begins to serve not just as a function, but as a craving. Dexter begins to seek that sense of calm, not only after a kill, but...
And he freaks out, like, he just needs it. Like, he calls his dark pep. David called a nigga his dark passenger, but he needs that. Like, he be craving it. And when he gets that kill, or doesn't get the kill correctly, it does something to him. He's right.
The patient one. This is classic urge tension release cycle, seen in both violent offenders and behavioral addicts. Harry's death is perhaps one of the most psychologically revealing moments in Dexter's early childhood. For years, Dexter believes Harry died of natural causes.
But it wasn't.
It's the truth.
And when Dexter turned, the look on his face, he was so proud. No one deserves to be in pieces. The code is a theory, an idea. What I saw, what Dexter did. I don't think I can live with this.
He killed himself, Dexter. How? He called me the day before he died. Asked me to keep an eye on you and your sister. I didn't realize what that call meant until he was gone.
Harry committed suicide after witnessing one of Dexter's dismemberments. This is not just the loss of a father figure, it's the loss of the one person who defined Dexter's sense of morality, identity, and worth. From a psychological standpoint, Harry's suicide leaves a vacuum. Dexter is now untethered from the very authority that kept his actions framed as control. The code remains, but its author is gone. This introduces the beginnings of what will later become a key theme in Dexter's adult development: moral erosion. Dexter continues following the code, but begins making his own interpretations. Personal revenge, emotional motivations, deviations from the original rules will start to emerge. And critically, the voice of Harry remains, now internalized as an imaginary authority figure, appearing in moments of stress or conflict. This is a form of introjected conscience, common in individuals raised with rigid behavioral expectations. They don't internalize values, they internalize voices. Dexter's version of morality never became his own. It became a ghost he argues with. Following all of this in his adolescence behind the scenes, Dexter still functions as a high-achieving, rational adult. He's academically successful, physically competent, socially plausible. But beneath that, structurally, he's a hollow construct of other people's fears and rules. As Dexter enters adulthood, he believes himself to be in control. The urge is contained, the rules are in place, the ritual is perfected. But control is not the same as healing. Dexter hasn't processed his trauma. He's organized it, neatly, efficiently, elegantly, like a well-wrapped body. Just like his victims, the parts of his psyche he finds inconvenient are cut away and disposed of, not in a swamp this time, but in the silence of a blood-slashed box. The stage is now set, the code is functioning, and the mask has fused to the face. When the eye-struck killer begins taunting him, dismembering victims with surgical precision, draining blood with elegance, leaving pieces behind like clues, Dexter feels something deeper than admiration. He feels seen. This is clinically significant. What we're witnessing is the beginning of narcissistic mirroring. Dexter isn't just fascinated by the killer's artistry. He's unconsciously drawn to the idea that someone out there is like him, someone who understands, someone who plays with him. And yet, the killer, who is actually Brian, is not like Dexter. He doesn't follow a code. He doesn't kill only those who deserve it. His murders are aesthetically charged, emotionally symbolic, and, as we learn, driven by a desire to reconnect with his long-lost brother through shared bloodlust. Psychologically, Brian represents the uncontrolled version of Dexter. Where Dexter channels his darkness into order, Brian lets it flow through him freely. This sets up classical internal split. I'm about to say, especially
after Rita's death, when Brian was the ghost, you can really see that, where Dexter was letting the kills just happen and letting what he wants to flow freely. It wasn't it being controlled, it being hostage, basically.
Technicians would label splitting or self-fracture. Dexter sees himself in Brian, but is also repelled by what Brian represents, the abandonment of control. This is why Dexter becomes both drawn to and threatened by him. In Brian, he sees the shadow of his own potential, and it terrifies him. Throughout Season 1, Dexter adheres to the code with religious precision. He targets killers who've evaded justice, a paedophile choir master, a rapist who escaped conviction, a man who stages DUI deaths. Each time the ritual is the same: stalk, verify guilt, prepare the kill room, extract the blood slide, then dismember and dispose at sea. On the surface this looks like morality, but it's not. What we see, psychologically, is moral mimicry. Dexter is not driven by empathy or outrage. He's driven by structure. The kill ritual is a behavioral pattern that regulates his internal tension. The blood slide is not a memorial, it's a compulsion. He isn't seeking justice, he's seeking relief. And the moment he meets Brian, someone who kills without relief, without remorse, and without rules, the foundation of the code begins to crack. For the first time, Dexter asks, what if the code isn't morality? What if it's just a leash? Dexter's emotional world is muted at best. His relationships with Masuka and the rest of the precinct are surface level, maintained only to preserve his cover.
He don't care about
his
other
connection
niggas.
to Rita is strategic. She's trauma bonded, sexually uninterested, and easily managed. For Dexter, this is ideal, a relationship with intimacy but not vulnerability. But when Brian re-enters his life, masquerading as Rudy Cooper, everything shifts. Brian does what no one else has done. He plays Dexter's game, understands his
The
thoughts,
T.
and encourages it. It isn't until Brian captures Deborah and suggests they kill her together that Dexter's first true emotional rupture occurs.
I can't. Not Dad.
I know you've done, does it?
I'm very fond of her.
Be a killer and a hero. It doesn't work that way!
He doesn't just hesitate.
This is Wick's studio, built to meet any brief. When the brief calls for complex structure, let AI...
He refuses. Clinically, this moment signals the emergence of moral dissonance. Dexter, who has spent years believing himself incapable of love, is now forced to make an impossible choice. Protect the one person who offers him acceptance, or save the one person who represents his humanity. He chooses Deborah. This isn't about guilt or obligation. It's the first real emotional connection Dexter acts on. For the first time, his behavior isn't dictated by any sort of code. It's dictated by attachment, and that's significant. If Brian represents Dexter's shadow self, Deborah represents his one tether to normalcy. Dexter idolizes her father, the same man who ignored her to train Dexter. She sees Dexter as emotionally distant, but she needs him to care. And Dexter, despite his attachment, develops a form of compensatory attachment to her, not out of empathy, but out of identification. Deborah is the person he wants to be close to, but doesn't know how. This creates what we call an attachment paradox. The more Dexter tries to protect Deborah, the more obvious it becomes that he can't feel emotions normally. The more she draws close, the more he has to mask. And Brian's plan to eliminate Deborah is a symbolic attack on the one bond that humanizes Dexter. His choice.
Dang, see, that makes sense. That makes sense, especially with the depth thing. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. This, hey, he did his research and he watched the show to a T. He's good at this, man. Certain people are just, he's good at this, man.
The choice to kill Brian is not just a sacrifice. It's a declaration. I want to remain tethered to the world, even if I don't belong in it. Splitting is a defense mechanism, the mind's way of keeping contradictions at bay. Dexter has always split his identity into two parts, the monster and the mask. The code helped him preserve this duality. He kills monsters by night and plays the harmless analyst by day, but Brian's existence collapses that boundary. Brian doesn't split, he integrates. He's charming, loving, sadistic, and expressive all at once. There's no separation between his public and private self. This is what forces Dexter into psychological crisis, because now, for the first time, he sees that his own split is unsustainable. He can't keep pretending forever. The darkness will surface, whether he wants it to or not, and it terrifies him. This is the beginning of self-awareness, not in the healthy, grounded sense, but in the tragic, creeping realization that he's not who he pretends to be. Season 1 doesn't just introduce Dexter to a serial killer, it introduces him to himself, unfiltered, unmasked, and unbound. Brian Moser is the embodiment of what Dexter could become if the code were removed, and in many ways, what Dexter wants to be, but can't. Because while Brian is chaos, Dexter craves structure. While Brian is honest about his darkness, Dexter hides behind rules. And while Brian is emotionally expressive, twisted as it may be, Dexter is empty, filled with only echoes of Harry's voice. By killing Brian, Dexter doesn't defeat evil. He silences the part of himself that dares to exist without a mask. But the crack has formed, and as psychologists will tell you, once the self fractures, it never fully holds together again. Season 2 opens with a disturbing development for Dexter. He can't kill, not due to morality, but due to surveillance. Sergeant Dokes is tailing him 24/7, but even when he briefly slips free, he fails to follow through. His attempt to kill Jimmy Sensio ends with him freezing up. He blames logistics, but clinically, what we're seeing is something deeper, inhibited compulsion. The ritual isn't just about killing, it's about psychic balance. When that balance is interrupted, by Dokes, by Deborah moving in, by the emotional fallout of killing Brian, the entire structure buckles. In psychological terms, Dexter is experiencing maladaptive perfectionism. If he can't control the ritual exactly, he doesn't trust himself to carry it out at all. This is a classic sign of someone whose behavior isn't actually autonomous, but governed by obsessive patterning. Without the ritual, there's no release, only anxiety. What makes Dexter's paralysis even more striking is that his addiction, which he calls the Dark Passenger, is now being framed in recovery terms. Under pressure from Rita, Dexter joins Narcotics Anonymous. The genius of
She's
this
so
development
bad.
is that it gives us a clinical parallel. Dexter's pathology begins to mirror substance addiction, complete with withdrawal, denial, triggers, and relapse. But here's the twist. Dexter isn't just attending Narcotics Anonymous to keep up appearances. He starts to relate to the process. When Lila tells him he's emotionally shut down, she's not wrong. She just doesn't realize what's behind the curtain.
Yeah, she doesn't really
He
know.
admits to relapsing. What he's actually describing is a compulsion cycle. The mounting pressure to kill, the failed attempts to abstain, and the eventual surrender. In clinical terms, he's no longer detached from his urges. He's becoming self-aware of their consequences, and that's dangerous. Because once a sociopath begins to feel the weight of his behavior, his entire framework of control comes into question. One of the key themes in season 2 is Dexter's growing guilt, but not the healthy kind. He doesn't feel remorse for killing per se. What he feels is guilt about his inability to maintain the illusion. This is most evident in his dynamic with Dokes. When Dokes discovers the
The Dokes Dexter season 2 was so good. Season 2 was so good. Season 2 was so good.
Dexter doesn't kill him immediately. Why? Because Dokes is innocent. Not of everything, but of the crimes Dexter punishes. According to the code, Dokes doesn't qualify.
Yeah, you can't kill him.
Puts Dexter in a bind. He can't let Dokes go, but he can't kill him either. The result is moral paralysis, an existential trap. Dexter builds a cage to physically contain Dokes, but it's a metaphor for the psychological cage he's now in. The rules are failing. The code, once absolute, is now confusion. And when Lila kills Dokes by burning down the cabin, Dexter experiences something new. Displaced guilt. He didn't kill Dokes, but he made it possible. And rather than processing that guilt,
He killed Lila.
realizes it. Lila becomes the monster. He pins the darkness on her, not himself. This is classic defensive displacement. Blame the arsonist, not the architect. Lila West is not just a love interest or a plot device. Psychologically, she's a symbol, a walking counterpoint to Harry's code. Where Harry preached discipline and secrecy, Lila celebrates chaos and exposure. She encourages Dexter to feel. She seduces him with the idea that his darkness doesn't need rules, it needs freedom. This is why Dexter is drawn to her and terrified by her. She represents pure impulse. And for someone like Dexter, who survives by suppressing impulse, she's both exhilarating and dangerous.
I am who I am, and I don't want you coming anywhere near me or my addiction. Do you understand?
Oh, I understand. How lonely you are.
Stop.
You don't have to handle it alone. I can help. I know how heavy that mask is. How tiring. I'm the only one who can see behind it, and it doesn't scare me. It's like looking in the mirror. It's when we belong together.
Last time I counted, there was 8 billion of us. All running in different...
Lila is his shadow self, not in terms of killing, but in terms of permission. She validates every feeling he spent his life trying to suppress. Their relationship isn't romantic, it's archetypal. Lila doesn't awaken love, she awakens narcissism. She makes Dexter feel special, untouchable, beyond rules, and for a moment, he believes her. He even contemplates abandoning the code. Lila's recklessness is also a mirror. When she kills Dokes, she does what Dexter was too afraid to do, and that's why she has to die. Not because she's evil, but because she exposes Dexter's weakness. While Dexter wrestles with his internal collapse, Deborah serves as the emotional contrast. She's rebuilding her life post-trauma and becoming emotionally grounded, even as Dexter spirals. Psychologically, this matters. Deborah is Dexter's primary attachment figure. Her stability represents the version of life Dexter thinks he's imitating, but her recovery reminds him that he's not actually living, he's acting. Her emotions are real, his.
It's not.
And this proximity to authenticity only deepens Dexter's alienation. It's a form of psychological mirroring, being surrounded by people who reflect the humanity he lacks. The more emotionally integrated Deborah becomes, the more Dexter begins to question his own facade. By the final episode, Dexter has managed to escape legal punishment. He frames Dokes, kills Lila, and reclaims his mask. But the cost is profound. For the first time, the killing is not ritual, it's reactive. Dokes was innocent, Lila was a loose end. These aren't clean cold kills, they're contingency kills. Decisions made to protect himself, not serve justice. And this changes everything. Dexter tells us he's free, that he's starting to embrace real connection. that the people in his life matter, but we now know the truth. The Predator has tasted what it feels like to kill outside the code and survive. And in the language of clinical psychology, that's not progress, that's escalation.
Chapter 5, his last one. The first crack.
The first thematic disruption is Rita's pregnancy. For a man like Dexter, emotionally detached, performative in affection, and psychosexually shaped by trauma, fatherhood should be terrifying, and it is at first. But what's striking is how quickly Dexter adapts. Not because he's suddenly developing empathy, but because the role of a father...
These serial killers, man. These serial killers remember children. Dexter had a child. Joe. Like, people are keeping these serial killers children, man.
One that feels more socially valid than his previous identity as a loner and imposter. Clinically, this is a pivot towards role-based identity formation. Instead of confronting who he is, Dexter starts hiding who he's supposed to be. The same psychological mechanism that let him pass as a good boyfriend now evolves. Husband, father, friend. But these masks are still armor, not evolution. Up until now, Dexter has followed the code of Harry with near religious adherence. But in season 3, we see him take a victim, a paedophile targeting his stepdaughter, not because the man escaped justice, but because Dexter was personally angry. This moment is pivotal. It marks the beginning of moral rationalization overriding the code. Dexter still talks about rules, he still performs the ritual, but his internal criteria are changing. The code becomes less about justice and more about justification, and this is clinically significant. What we're seeing is moral drift. The principle of never kill the innocent was already a simplification, but now even only kill the guilty is contextual. If someone threatens his family, disrespects him, or interferes with his image, they're suddenly fair game. The most important psychological relationship of this season is with Rita or Deborah. It's with Miguel Prado. What begins as an unlikely alliance becomes a dangerous mirror. Miguel is Dexter's first real friend, or so he believes. But in truth, what we're witnessing is a textbook case of pathological codependency. Miguel validates Dexter's darkness. Miguel encourages him to abandon the code. Miguel makes Dexter feel less alone, not morally, but exponentially. Clinically, this is not friendship, it's ego reinforcement. For the first time, Dexter is no longer a monster in the shadows. He's a warrior with a partner. But this dynamic quickly becomes parasitic. Miguel doesn't want a friend, he wants permission. He wants to kill, and he wants Dexter to open that door for him.
Because I know you wouldn't approve. Because she wasn't guilty. Apparently we have a different definition of that word.
You got rid of her because she got in your way. Whatever happened to serving justice?
Is that really why you do this, Dex? To serve justice?
You
don't have to pretend with each other.
That's what I thought.
Dexter's mistake isn't trusting Miguel. It's believing that his darkness makes him special, when in reality, it makes him vulnerable to people who crave the same release. When Miguel kills Ellen Wolf, not a criminal, not a predator, but simply someone he disliked, Dexter faces a profound psychological rupture. Miguel has broken rules, but more importantly, Miguel has broken Dexter's illusion of control. Up until now, Dexter has believed his actions were different from other killers, because they were structured, justified, clean. But Miguel showed him the dark truth. Anyone can ritualize violence. Anyone can give themselves permission. And this is where we see the emergence of narcissistic injury. Dexter's identity isn't built on empathy or remorse. It's built on being different. Miguel ruins that fantasy. He's a killer just like Dexter, but he's sloppy, angry, chaotic. In clinical terms, Miguel represents the ego collapse Dexter has avoided since childhood. Dexter killing Miguel is not a code-based execution. It's an emotional decision. Miguel is a threat to his image, to his family, to his secrets. There's no trial, no vetting, no moral logic. It's protective homicide. And this is where the first true psychological crack appears. Dexter's killing is no longer purely compulsive or ritualistic. It's now about controlling the narrative. Lila was the first sign. Miguel is confirmation. This transition.
This nigga is cooking. This nigga is cooking.
From righteous predator to unconscious tyrant is subtle but seismic. We no longer have a killer guided by rules. We have a man who kills to maintain his reality. Meanwhile, Deborah's arc continues to provide humanizing contrast. She's chaotic, yes, emotional, reactive, messy, but she's real. Deborah is feeling her way through the trauma. Dexter is faking his way through humanity. What makes this important is how often Dexter leans on her without realizing it. In psychodynamic terms, Deborah is Dexter's emotional surrogate, his conscience, his emotional processor, his boundary. When he doesn't know how to feel, he watches her. That said, their relationship is deeply dysfunctional. Deborah's need for approval, shaped by Harry's neglect, mirrors Dexter's need to perform normalcy. They're both still living in Harry's shadow, but while Deborah is trying to outgrow it, Dexter is still clinging to it. The final antagonist of the season, the Skinner, is thematically less important than what he triggers in Dexter, a return to the kill room. When Dexter is kidnapped, breaks free and kills the Skinner, it's the first time in the season he needs the ritual to restore psychological order. That's telling, because no matter how far he drifts from the code, from Harry or from reason, Dexter still requires the kill ritual to feel balanced. It's not about justice, it's about containment. The ritual is his medication. When the Skinner dies, Dexter kills with his bare hands. No plastic wrap, no prep, no blood slide,
Nothing.
just violence. But afterward, he stages a messy suicide. That duality, raw murder, followed by an attempt at control, summarizes Dexter's psychological state perfectly. The season ends on a seemingly happy note. Dexter and Rita are married, a new beginning, a family man, a transformed human. But during their first dance, blood from his broken hand seeps through his cast and stains Rita's wedding dress. It's a beautiful metaphor. No matter how clean he tries to be, Dexter's violence always finds its way through. Clinically, this is the emergence of surface dissonance, the idea that no matter how well someone manages their mask, the truth leaks out. This is especially relevant for high-functioning individuals with antisocial tendencies. They don't implode, they erode, and Dexter is starting to erode. Season 3 marks the moment where Dexter stops being the predator in control and becomes one in denial. He still believes in the mask, still thinks he's different, still trusts the code to protect him, but emotionally, he's no longer that composed killer from Season 1. He's fractured, reactive, compromised, and what makes it worse, he doesn't see it yet, but the audience and any trained eye can tell. The mask is beginning to slip.